Hi everyone! How are you? This is Angel Acebes the UGA Pecan entomologist. And the purpose of my lab primarily is to study the behavior and ecology of insects and use our understanding of that behavior and ecology to further improve the pest management strategies for pecan production here in the Southeast. And one of the important studies that we did for the last couple of years in our lab is understanding how pecan hedge pruning is affecting the populations of insects, both pests and natural enemies. And if you can see here today, you can see that this row was subjected to pecan hedge pruning, a freshly hedged, I believe, this year. And then this side here, as you can see, the branches are, overlapping with each other. And if you think about it, removing a huge chunk of a huge percentage of a pecan tree, what does it entail when it comes to the interaction between insects and the plants that they are feeding on? So what we did for the last couple of years was sampling this particular orchard. We have actually hedge and non-hedge, and the insects were sampled in the upper canopy and the lower canopy. In the upper canopy sampling, we used a lift where we had my students actually collecting leaves and nuts in the upper canopies of these trees. And we also use, depending on how tall the student was, we actually use a ladder to be able to sample from the lower canopy as well. So what did we sample for? We sampled for pecan aphids, all the species that are here, including black margin aphid, yellow pecan aphids, and black aphids as well. And we sampled throughout the season. We sampled early in the season, middle of the season, and late in the season. So across those periods in the season, we sampled both leaves and nuts. For the leaves, as I've said, we sampled for aphids. We also sampled for mites. We also sampled for pecan phylloxera galls on them. So whatever we can find that are feeding on those leaves were counted. What did we actually count for the nut samples? We counted for insect-related injury on them or any signs of insect presence. That could mean larvae of nutcase bearers, larvae of shockworms, and also larvae of pecan weevils, or any signs of holes or feeding evidence that we find on the pecan nuts. So what did we find out? Interestingly, just to give you a background here, so this orchard has been under what we call as a 3-year pecan hedge pruning program, meaning 1 year one side of the trees were hedged, the second year the other side of the trees were hedged, and the third year it's a rest year, so meaning that none of the trees were subjected to hedge pruning. And what we found, interestingly, at least for what we've been doing for the last 3 years, is that during the years that the trees have been subjected to hedge pruning, we found that the numbers of pests, in particular aphids, were affected by whether or not the limbs were removed. However, though, the insect-related injury on the nuts were actually not affected, whether or not the trees were pruned or during rest years. So the question therefore is pecan hedge pruning beneficial for the southeastern production? At this point, with regards to how this orchard was managed, I would say that pecan hedge pruning is not making the problem, at least in the insect related problems, worse. It's not making it better as well. But that's a good news though, because if you take into consideration the benefits that pecan hedge pruning can provide to growers, that would be increased resistance to storms or improved water usage of the trees, and also when it comes to yield and quality of the nuts, you kind of get those benefits. And of course, if pest management, it's that if you actually cut the limbs out and it's not making the situation worse, then that would be good for growers. And one thing though that we can note is that when you're opening up the canopy, as you can see here, it actually increases the efficiency of spray coverage as well. And that has been seen when it comes to disease management, in particular scab management. So you open up the canopy, you open up the surface area that the trees can be covered by the insecticide or fungicides. And that in that case actually is good for growers when it comes to insect pest management. And one thing that we also would want to emphasize is that yes, these trees can be hosts for pests that are feeding on them, but it can also be a host, or it can also offer a habitat that would promote natural enemies, and that includes lady beetles that are feeding on your aphids or eggs of your pests like nutcase bearers. You also have parasitic wasps. In particular, there is a parasitic wasp that would attack aphids, and what we've seen is that those wasps are actually found in the higher canopy of the trees than the lower canopy of the trees. And that is actually quite good, because if you think about it, you're spraying your trees, most of the lower canopies are exposed to sprays, whereas the upper canopies are not. So it's good to know that there is a wasp that can actually keep the population of aphids down in the upper canopy. And that is actually one of the focus of my student Kyle Slusher in one of his studies that's actually done in this part of the block. All right, and one important component of my program as well is developing extension materials for growers. And what I've been focusing to is using technology to make that possible. So we have what we call as a MyIPM app that is actually free for download in Android and iPhone devices, and that you can actually install it now if you can find it in your what is that, Apple Store or Google Marketplace. What can you find there? You can find information and insects that can attack pecans, their biology, their management, as well as specific materials that you can use for them. And we also do provide some information on how you can identify them. There are pictures that you can find there as well. And as for those who are interested, we are also we have an online website that you can track for an ambrosia beetle capture throughout the state of Georgia, as well as an online guide on whether or not when growers should actually spray for the nutcase bearers here in the south. All right, so that's pretty much it. Thank you so much.